What is going on, everyone? Welcome into this week's episode of Around the ACC with DP, part of the Cardinal Sports Zone Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to thank you all for making us part of your fandom journey this week. Thanks for tuning into all the shows across the network, Live with 55, the OG Cardinal Sports Zone Podcast, and of course, Around the ACC with DP. Also, thank you to all of the sponsors that make these shows and this network possible. Definitely appreciate it, and it doesn't go unnoticed. The Louisville football team is on a bye this week after defeating Clemson, so not much talk on football for this week's episode of the show. We'll more so go to the basketball side of the things, where so far in the first game, all of the ACC teams 1-0. Whether they played Monday or Tuesday, most of them played Monday, but all of the ACC teams are 1-0 to start the season. And for the Cardinals, they joined that group after defeating the Morehead State Eagles by 48 points. It was a blowout at the KFC Yum Center, 93-45. The first time that Louisville has won a game by over 45 points, or at least 45 points, since 2018. Highlighting that it's been a rough past couple of years for us as Cardinal basketball fans. But I want to look a little bit, focusing on this game against Tennessee, focusing on the ACC as a whole. Let's look across the ACC, some teams that I feel like performed really well, some teams that I'm like, could have been better in the first game. It starts out with the Duke Blue Devils. They actually were only up by 11 at the end of the first half, but opened it up in the second half, 96-62 over Maine. Kong Kanoopel, a five-star freshman that Louisville actually brought in for an official visit. He led Duke with 22 points. Freshman sensation Cooper Flagg was 6 of the 15 from the field. He had 18 points, 5 assists, 7 rebounds for the 5 starters, scored in double figures for the Blue Devils. So John Shire's team really good in that first game against Maine. You look also across the board, Miami put up over 100, 113-72 over Fairleigh Dickinson. Fantastic game for the Hurricanes. Lynn Kidd, senior for the Hurricanes, spent the past 3 years at Virginia Tech. This is third ACC team. Had 24-9 in that game. Jim Larinaga's team looked really, really good. And, of course, a lot of these games were played against inferior competition. But it was nice to see, who played well, who struggled, so on and so forth. So Miami and Duke impressed me the most. Pittsburgh won 96-56 over Radford. But some teams didn't necessarily have the most convincing games, like North Carolina. North Carolina only won by 14 over Elon. It was 90-76. They scored a lot, but they also gave up a ton. RJ Davis, who could be in the Naismith Player of the Year conversation, 24.7 rebounds, 7 assists. He was really good in that game at home for the Tar Heels. Florida State won by 12 over Northern Kentucky. Florida State's a team that I really just don't know much about this year. They lost some players. A lot of these teams, you just kind of have to wait and see. Wake Forest only won by 15 over Coppin State. Coppin State, if you remember, was one of the few teams that Louisville did beat last year. So that was one that I'm like, okay. And then California, 86-73, winning in that game, only winning by 13. So on Wednesday, you had Virginia, who, look, guys, when I wasn't really all that sold on Virginia anyway. And then they went out and they had a 9-point victory over Campbell. And I just don't know about the Cavaliers. Like, they beat Pfeiffer, who isn't a D1 team, but then they lost to Virginia. So with no Tony Bennett, how good is this Virginia team actually going to be? Well, they have, some players that, Isaac McNeely is going to be really good. He had 11 points, but you've also got some guys that you need to step up. Players that aren't used to being, relied upon to produce at this level. I look, I don't think Virginia finishes top 7 in the conference. I know that might seem a little bit far fetched, but I don't think that they finish top 7 in the conference. Now, by the time this episode will have aired, Wake Forest plays a game, SMU plays a game, California plays a game. But you look toward the weekend at some possible good matchups. I'm interested to see VCU at Boston College. VCU beat Bellarmine by almost 20 points earlier this week. Boston College, really interested to see what that looks like. The main game that we'll focus on, North Carolina goes to the Fog, playing in Allen Fieldhouse against the number 1 Kansas Jayhawks. Kansas is an 8.5-point favorite over North Carolina, and this is a contest that you're really going to get a good idea early on as to, well, how good are the Tar Heels? How good is this team? And I just don't know. Like, I have my reservations about North Carolina, but I do think that they're ultimately going to get things picked up, and they're going to have a pretty decent season. So, but they are my projected number 2 team in the conference. So definitely something to focus on. You have Michigan at Wake Forest on Sunday, another one that I'm keeping an eye on. Michigan is 1-0 after defeating Cleveland State 101-53 this week. And the other game, North Florida at Georgia Tech. North Florida upset South Carolina on the road. They'll play at Georgia Tech in McCamish Pavilion coming up on Sunday. So something to focus on there. It's really early to really get analytical into these performances. Louisville does play Tennessee on Saturday. I think that there's a really good chance that the Cardinals could upset the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee is 1-0 after defeating Gardner-Webb 80-64 on Monday. It was a performance that, should have resulted by the numbers by KenPom and company. Should have been about a 25-point victory against Gardner-Webb. And Tennessee lost a lot of players, obviously. 4 of their top 6 scorers. It starts with Dalton Knecht. Dalton Knecht, the best player on that Tennessee team a year ago, one of the best players in the country. He's with the Lakers. You had Jonas Adu in the front court, transfer from Tennessee to Arkansas. Key rotational pieces, Santiago Vescovi, Josiah Jordan-James, 2 really instrumental pieces in this Tennessee program that have been really good, secondary scorers and really good versatile defenders. You bring back the SEC reigning defensive player of the year, Zakai Ziegler, who has played 3 seasons of high Division I basketball, a lot of minutes for Tennessee in that period. He's going to be the floor general, but he's also going to be relied upon to be a little bit more, he's going to be relied upon to be more in a scoring responsibility. Now, they brought in North Florida transfer Chaz Lanier, who I think will probably be the leading scorer for the Volunteers. He had 3 seasons at North Florida, kind of average. And then that 4th season, I don't know what happened, but 19 points per game. And I think he's going to come to Tennessee and be known to be a scorer. Doesn't do much outside of score the basketball, but nonetheless, that's what they need. So you have Zakai Ziegler back, Jemai Meshack, rotational piece. He's going to be relied upon to take a step forward in the backcourt. You have a transfer, or he actually transferred in before last season. That is Jordan Gainey. He had 16 points in the opener against Gardner-Webb. The 6'3" native of Tucson, Arizona is going to be relied upon in that backcourt. But Tennessee will likely not be at full strength in this game against Louisville. Darlin Stone Dubar, a guy who averaged about 18 points, 8 rebounds for Hofstra last year. 3 seasons at Hofstra, 3 seasons scoring in double digits. He stepped away from the program due to personal reasons, according to head coach Rick Barnes. Don't know why, personal reasons. He's still with the team every day. He's just not playing. Now, we don't know if he is for sure going to be out against Louisville. You can probably predict that he will be because Barnes didn't have a timetable for his return. But regardless, we hope that Dubar is okay. We hope that, his situation ends up being okay and that he's able to return on the court for the Volunteers sooner rather than later. But he is a really good 3-and-D player, great shooter, especially off the catch and shoot. Great versatile defender at 6'8". You're going to have to rely on other players to be able to fill in that role. And Tennessee isn't a deep team already, and then you factor in one of the key players in the team or on the team that's supposed to produce. It's going to be interesting. Now, the front court is interesting. You got two transfers in. You have Felix Okpara, started over 40 games in 2 seasons with the Ohio State Buckeyes. He's not really a huge scoring threat, but he is really good in terms of on-ball defense and rebounding. And then you also have a transfer from, I believe it is Charlotte, Igor Milicic Jr., 6'10", 225 pounds. Is a player that likes to step out and hit the three ball at 6'10". Not necessarily a guy that is playing a ton of an interior threat, but nonetheless, he's a good player. So you have a Tennessee roster that is going on the road in a potential raucous environment at the KFC Yum Center, noon tip-off, in what is going to potentially be a really good crowd for the first time in a long time. Early season test on the road. You're having to figure some things out in terms of your identity on the court. Losing 4 of your top 6 scorers. How can Tennessee respond? I'm not really worried about Tennessee three-point shooting and defending. That's what their strengths are going to be this season: perimeter shooting and versatile defending. Well, one thing that I am worried about with Tennessee is outside of Zakai Ziegler, who is a really good floor general, averaged over 5 rebounds per game as a sophomore, 6 as a junior, and now as a senior, 9 assists in that first game against Gardner-Webb. He's a really good passer, really good defender. Outside of him, who's going to initiate and create for the offense? That's the thing I'm focusing on, because you look at Chaz Lanier, really good scorer, not so much a facilitator and creator for his teammates. Same thing with Jemai Mashak and Jordan Gainey. And you have some freshmen that need to step up, or you have some returning players that need to step up, like you have Cade Phillips, you have JP Estrella. How are they going to take the next step forward? Because this is a rotation that I feel like Louisville matches up well with. Yeah, they might lose some on-court cohesion because they substitute a lot, but this seems like a matchup that Louisville's going to try to exhaust Tennessee to the fullest. They've got some mismatches with Case and Pryor, and they're going to try to bring Tennessee's interior help out to the perimeter and just make them run. Get out and run in transition. That's what Louisville likes to do. And with Tennessee not having all that deep of a bench, Darlin Stone Dubart possibly or probably not playing against Louisville, and they're down another key projected piece in the puzzle. This is a very interesting situation. I feel like Louisville is facing Tennessee at the right time to be able to pull off this upset. And I do think Louisville does win this game. I think that there's going to be some points scored. I could see both teams scoring over 70 points. But I do think that Louisville is going to win this game. Another thing that I'm kind of focused on here is, the whole keys of the game. I think if Louisville wins this game, it's because blank. Well, I think personally for me, you defend the three-point line well. You force Tennessee to drive the basketball and take tough shots. And you just make them get out and run in transition. You take away Zakai Ziegler. And you force other guys to be able to create for their team. So I think Louisville wins this. It wouldn't surprise me if they lose. Look, Tennessee's got a lot of talent. Don't take me saying this as saying, yeah, Tennessee's not a good team. They're ranked inside the top 15 preseason for a reason. But I think of all the ranked teams that Louisville will play in the next month or so, Tennessee's probably the most vulnerable for the Cardinals to beat. Really interested to see what happens in this game. Just a heads up, there won't be an Around the ACC with DP next week. I will be out of town on a work trip. Just a heads up, we will be back the week following. Just wanted to give you an update on the scheduling on the show. Appreciate y'all understanding. I apologize for the inconvenience and not having a show, but again, appreciate y'all understanding. That is going to wrap up this episode of Around the ACC with DP. Everyone have a great day. Have a great start to your weekend. We'll see you right back here very soon.